Hello, and welcome to our podcast on parentheses and dashes. These are a couple important pieces of punctuation, although we don't use them very often, but we want to make sure that you have been exposed to them and that you have a general idea on how to use them. So the first reason for using the parentheses, which are those curvy brackets, is to enclose explanatory details. So these are details that are secondary, meaning they're not all that important, and we want to go ahead and set them off for some particular reason. So for example, in the sentence, in addition to serving as class treasurer, a challenging job, she was also a National Merit Scholar. And so the phrase, a challenging job, describes class treasurer, of course, but it is completely secondary. We don't need that at all to make our sentence make any sense. We could just say, in addition to serving as class treasurer, she was also a National Merit Scholar. But for whatever reason, if we wanted to add how difficult a job class treasurer was, and we really want to make it less important or even to stand out, then we're going to go ahead and put parentheses around them. And so those are the curvy brackets that you see there. This is pretty much the same role that dashes play. And so we use these to separate secondary descriptors or also to add emphasis on certain words or phrases. For example, Dr. Evans, a noted scientist and educator, spoke at our graduation ceremony. Okay, Dr. Evans, a noted scientist and educator, do we have to have a noted scientist in there? Probably not. We could just say Dr. Evans spoke. We could also, if we wanted to, use commas there. Dr. Evans, comma, a noted scientist and educator, comma, spoke at our graduation ceremony. But for some reason, stylistically, we felt like that descriptor needed more emphasis, needed more isolation. We can go ahead and surround that with dashes. Another example, the homecoming float, a cobbled mess of wire and nails, meandered dangerously down the street. Again, a cobbled mess of wire and nails is not essential. Perhaps we wanted to separate it, though, to give it a little bit more emphasis, to add some comedic relief to that sentence. Therefore, we're going to go ahead and use either parentheses or dashes. So here we go. We have a little bit of practice. Go ahead and take a look at these three sentences and see if you can find the information that further describes something, but is clearly secondary, meaning it needs to stand off on its own, either through the use of parentheses or dashes. So in sum, parentheses and dashes are occasionally used in academic writing. People may be using them in their essays for various things. Oftentimes, though, they tend to add a little bit more break from the sentence and their descriptor, and so the feel of something enclosed in parentheses or dashes is that it's more separate from the material than if you separate it just by the use of commas. If you are reading something aloud and you do come across a parentheses or dash, then the pause is very similar to that of a comma. It's just kind of a half pause. It's not a full stop. You don't, go out and get a cup of coffee or something like that. It's just a similar small pause as in like a comma. But it does seem to set off the information more. And probably the biggest thing to take away from this is if you are setting something apart with a dash or a parenthesis, that whatever you start that break with, you have to end it with. So if you start something with a comma, end it with a comma. If you start with the curvy bracket, end with the curvy bracket. Start with a dash, end with a dash. You can't change it halfway because that's just weird and wrong, so don't do it. Anyway, I think that's it. Pretty short podcast today, parentheses and dashes. We don't use them a lot, but sometimes we do. We want to make sure that we have the basic understanding of those. So if you have any questions, as always, bring those into class. We'll get those answered for you. And otherwise, we will see you soon. Thanks.